Hi, I'm Christy with OESD and welcome to your stitch party. In today's stitch party we'll be making this patchwork zipper pouch in this cute hexy shape. You're going to love making this pouch and you'll find that the process is really addictive. You're going to want to make tons of these little pouches to hold everything from your earbuds to your phone chargers to anything that just needs tidying up. Let's take a look at how these are made. First, we'll need our fabrics. We need one piece of fabric for the pouch back, and for the pouch front, we need actually 4 pieces of fabric, 2 for each side of the zipper. We will use a 6 by 4 inch piece for the 2 pieces that are closest to the zipper, and then a 6 by 2.5 inch piece for the 2 pieces that are on the outside of the pouch. So 4 pieces altogether on the front of the pouch. The stabilizer that we'll be using today is OESD Fusion Fleece. Fusion Fleece is a lightweight fusible fleece. It has a fusible on one side, and it's perfect for creating a little bit of loft in your embroidered items. But what I really like about this stabilizer is that it has a very consistent, smooth texture. So that's going to help us in 2 ways on this project. First of all, because it's so consistent, we can use it as the stabilizer. We don't need to add an additional stabilizer to our batting. With most battings that you would be using, they are going to have inconsistent spots, which means that you'll have parts of your design where you don't have the support you need for the stitching. But because this Fusion Fleece is made so consistently, it actually can function as your stabilizer. The other way that this smooth texture is going to help us is that it's actually going to be exposed on the inside of our pouch. So the inside of the pouch isn't lined. The Fusion Fleece actually serves as the lining as well as the batting. But it has a nice smooth texture, so it's not going to catch like it might if you had just batting exposed on the inside of your project. We'll also be using the OESD bobbin thread and the isocord thread in the needle. The isocord polyester thread is that 40 weight tri-lobal polyester. We'll be using it for this project to actually do the quilting and the piecing for the project. This 40 weight thread is strong enough to hold this project together, so we can use it in the needle even when we do the seam stitch for this project. The bobbin thread we're using is the OESD bobbin thread. This is a 60 weight spun polyester, and it's that 60 weight, so it's a little bit lighter than our needle thread, which is a 40 weight thread, and that's going to help us have the tension balance that we need when we do a nice embroidered stitch. This spun polyester is nice and strong, so again, when we do the seam stitch part of our design, we don't have to worry about the seam coming apart in our project. The polyester bobbin thread comes in both white and black, and it's a very economical thread, so it's a good thread to use for embroidery on a regular basis. Now, in addition to our thread and our fabrics, we do need a zipper. I like the Atkinson design zippers because they come in so many different colors, and it makes it really fun to either coordinate and find a beautiful color that really goes well with my fabrics, or to do something contrasting and put a little punch in the middle of my project. So we just need one zipper for this project, and it needs to be at least 7 inches. It can be longer because we'll be cutting the ends of the zipper off, but it needs to be at least 7 inches long. We'll also be using some tools today, so we'll use the Grotz-Beckert embroidery needle, our bobbin that will wind with our bobbin thread, a point turner, a mini applique iron, a Teflon pressing sheet, and then we need some embroidery scissors. The Grotz-Beckert embroidery needles are a nice strong needle that are going to perform well for embroidery. They do have a larger eye, so they can accommodate that heavier 40 weight thread. There are 2 pairs of scissors that I would recommend for a project like this. One of them are the curved easy snips. These are your great everyday trim the jump stitches kind of scissors. So you'll have a few places where you have a jump stitch to trim in this project, or to trim the tail at the beginning of your stitching. These are perfect for that. They have a micro serrated edge on one edge that actually helps to catch that little bit of thread that likes to stick up from our project. That serrated edge can help to catch that and make sure we have a nice clean finish. Also, I like the in the hoop applique scissors. There's a couple places in this project where we'll actually be trimming some fabric in the hoop, and these have a nice flat blade but a curved handle that makes it easy for us to trim away the fabrics while it's still in the hoop. I also recommend a Teflon pressing sheet for this project. We'll be doing some pressing of our fabrics to our fusion fleece in the hoop. And if we have a Teflon pressing sheet, we can cover that so we don't accidentally touch the iron to the fusible portion of the fleece. The iron I like to use for pressing in the hoop is called the petite press. This is a small-headed applique iron, but it's a little bit bigger than some of the applique irons that you'll see, so it's got a little bit more surface, doesn't take quite as long to iron things in place. It does get pretty hot, not as hot as a regular handheld iron, but certainly hot enough to adhere to our fusion fleece product. And it does have a temperature control. Also, it has a built-in kickstand, so I can set it right on my ironing surface without having to worry about that sole of the iron touching the ironing board. We'll need a point turner. This is a tried and true tool, and if you haven't used yours in a while, it's time to get it out. This is great for when we turn that project, especially with this hexagon shape. We want to make sure that all the corners are really pointed as neatly as possible. Otherwise, our hexagon will end up looking just like a circle shape. Of course, in addition to our tools and our fabrics, we need our embroidery machine. We'll need our module, our power cord, our embroidery foot. Don't forget to load an embroidery needle. And we'll need the embroidery hoop that's large enough for a 5.5 by 5.87 inch design. We'll also need a USB stick to load our design. So let's get started on our project. The first thing is to cut our fabrics. So the fabric back is the 7 by 7 piece, and then the front is the two 6 by 4 and two 6 by 2.5 pieces. Now your two center pieces are actually the bigger pieces, and the outside pieces are the smaller pieces. These do not have to necessarily be the same fabric on either side of the zipper. You could use 4 different fabrics on the front of your pouch if you wanted to, but you do need 2 that are 6 by 4 and 2 that are 6 by 2.5. We'll actually make the back of the pouch first so that we can assemble it with the front of the pouch design. So we'll select design number 12326-10. That's actually the back of the pouch. And we'll start by hooping our piece of fusion fleece with the fusible side up. And when you look at this, you can see by looking at this fusion fleece how smooth and consistent the texture of this stabilizer batting is. So we've got the fusible side up. That's going to be your shiny side with just a little bit of reflective surface. If you're not sure which side is the fusible side, just hold it up to the light and you'll see that fusible shine. So next we'll actually place this hoop on the machine, and we're going to stitch the first color change of that design, which is our placement stitch. So you can see it's going to stitch your hexagon shape right onto the stabilizer by itself. Now at this point you'll take the hoop off of the machine, but do not take the stabilizer out of the hoop. We'll take that 7 by 7 inch piece of fabric and place it with the right side up onto the fusion fleece and just center it over that placement line. So you should not see that placement line anywhere peeking out from the outside of your fabric. Now you're going to take this over to your applique iron and press the fabric to the fusion fleece. And you can see that this small size of this applique iron makes it pretty easy not to iron onto the fusible, not to get our iron tip onto the fusible part of the fusion fleece, but just to actually fuse the fabric. But again, you can use that Teflon pressing sheet and lay over the whole thing, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Now we're going to return the hoop to the machine now that we've pressed the fabric to the fusion fleece, which should baste it in place really nicely, and we'll stitch the basting stitch. So this is just going to stitch that hexagon shape, holding the fabric to the stabilizer. And then finally we'll stitch the third color change, which is the last color change of this design, and that's the quilting pattern. So that will do the actual quilting texture that will be on the back of our pouch. Now we can take the project out of the hoop and we'll trim it. Use your rotary cutter and ruler and measure a 1/4 inch away from the line on the outside of your quilting and trim all the way around your hexagon. So here you have your finished back, and you're going to set this aside and start the front of the pouch. For the front of the pouch, the first thing that we need to do is to take the two 6x4 pieces and we're going to press them in half lengthwise. So this way we'll have two folded pieces that measure 6x2. So just press them so that you have a nice crease on one side of that fabric. Now we're going to set the machine up like we did before. We'll put our bobbin thread in the bobbin and our isocord in the needle. We will select the other pouch design, which is 12326-09. That's the front of the pouch. And we'll hoop our OESD Fusion Fleece again with the fusible side up. So now we're using the other piece of Fusion Fleece. Now we'll stitch the first color change. The first color change on this pouch design is the zipper placement stitch, which will look like a rectangle. You're going to place the zipper onto the hoop within the placement lines. Here I have a short 7-inch zipper. If you have a longer zipper, that is perfectly fine. The only thing you need to watch out for is just to make sure that the zipper stop on both ends is past your rectangle. So if here is my end of my stitched rectangle, my placement line is right in here, then the zipper stop needs to be beyond that at the top and the bottom. It really doesn't matter if you center the zipper perfectly if it's a longer zipper, as long as both stops are past the placement line. Now your next step is to put a little bit of tape on either side of that zipper to hold it in place and place the hoop back on the machine and stitch color change 2, which is going to do this zipper tack down. And you can see it's going to make a U shape to tack down the zipper in place. Now you'll take the tape off, remove the hoop from the machine, but don't take the project out of the hoop. You'll take that first folded piece of fabric and you're going to align the folded edge, so look at your folded edge here, with the zipper teeth. You want it to be butted right up next to the teeth of the zipper along the folded edge. Now the top and the bottom of the fabric should just extend past the zipper placement line. So again, perfectly centered doesn't matter as much as the fact that we've got both ends of the fabric extending past that placement line. Now what we'll do is actually take this back to our applique iron and lightly press this in place. And that's just going to help hold the fabric in place while we do the next stitching. So we'll return the project to the machine and we'll stitch color change 3. Color change 3 will stitch a line right along the edge of the zipper. This is called tack down 1, and it's going to tack down this first piece of fabric. It's also going to be the edge stitching along the zipper. Now the next color change is going to stitch your placement stitch 2. So we've stitched our tack down. The next color change, number 4, is going to stitch a placement stitch right here. Our next step is to use those applique scissors and trim 1/4 inch from that placement line. So there's the placement line we just stitched. We'll trim 1/4 inch away, and this is what we'll have left. So we'll have our placement line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance extending past it from our first piece of fabric. Now we're going to take our second piece of fabric, which is one of the 6 by 2.5 inch pieces. We're going to place it right sides together. So think of this just like it were a regular sewing project at your sewing machine. You would place those fabrics right sides together. And we're going to align the long 6-inch raw edge with the seam allowance we just trimmed. So these are right sides together, and that long edge is lined up with that edge we just trimmed. Now we're going to stitch color change number 5. Color change number 5 is tack down 2, which is the second tack down that's going to sew fabric 2 to fabric 1. So there'll be a seam right here that will be sewing through both the top fabric and the original fabric we placed on the hoop. Now we'll be able to flip that second fabric back. We'll take the hoop off the machine and just fold this fabric back. You can kind of finger press this, and then after you finger press it, take your applique iron and iron the fabric to the fusion fleece. So it's going to hold it in place really nicely. Now we're going to take the second piece of folded fabric and place it along the zipper teeth. So we've just ironed down this piece of fabric. Now we're going to add the folded piece of fabric. Again, like we did with the first step, aligning the folded edge with the zipper teeth. You can use your applique iron again to fuse that in place. And now we'll just repeat the steps we did for the other side. So we'll stitch color change 6, which will be tacked down 3. So it's tacking down the third piece of fabric, and it's also going to be the edge stitching along the zipper. Then we'll do color change 7, which is our placement stitch 4. So it puts a placement guide here, which is where fabric 4 is going to go. Next, we'll trim that 1/4 inch seam allowance from that placement line. And then we'll place our final piece of fabric right sides together with fabric 3, aligning the raw edge with the seam we just trimmed. And then we'll stitch color change 8, which is the tack down number 4. So that's going to sew fabric 4 to the front of the pouch. So there's our seam. And now we can remove this hoop from the machine and flip that fabric back. Then we'll use our applique iron to press that into place. Now we're going to return the hoop to the machine now that we've got all the fabrics placed, and we'll stitch color change 9. This is a basting stitch, so this is going to place our hexagon shape in place. And once we've stitched the basting in place, we can now stitch the final color change, which is number 10, and that's the quilting. Now after we've stitched the quilting stitch, we're going to unzip the zipper halfway down, and this is really important. We have to unzip the zipper at this point, halfway down, not all the way, but just halfway through the project. Now we can take the project back that we set aside earlier, and we're going to place it right sides together with the project front. So again, just imagine as if you were sewing this together on your sewing machine. You'd place the pieces right sides together. And then we'll use a little bit of removable tape just to hold that project in place, hold that back in place onto the front. Now color change 11 is the last color change, and this is going to stitch the seam stitch, which will stitch through all the layers, holding the project back to the project front. Once you've stitched that, you can actually remove the project from the hoop and trim all the layers to a 1/4 inch from the seam stitch line. You'll also want to clip the corners, so clip all 6 corners of this project before you turn it. Now before you can turn it, you'll have to cut away the fusion fleece from behind the zipper. So you'll flip over the project, and this is another good place to use those in the hoop applique scissors. You'll trim behind the zipper and trim completely up next to the zipper placement lines so that you have an open area behind the zipper. Now you can just turn it inside out. Be sure you use your point turner to point out the corners and then press the project so it has a really nice smooth finish. And then your pouch is ready to use. You can see how fun this project is to do in different colors, and it's a really good size for earbuds, power cords, things like that. I love this little hexagon shaped project. Now, if you like making this zipper project, doing this piecing and quilting all in the hoop and putting in your zippers, you are going to love the Patchwork zipper pouches. So this is the coordinating collection using the same techniques as we just learned in this pouch. There are 6 different pouches in this collection. So we've got 3 different rectangular pouches, and you can see you've got this one has stipple quilting with an angled piecing on the front. This one has the 4 corners and a nice trefoil type quilting design. Here is another hexagon one with actually has 6 pieces of fabric on the front and 2 different fabrics on the back. So this one would be really cute to see done in scrappy fabrics. Here's another rectangle pouch. Here's the pouch we just did, and another hexagon pouch. This one also has a pieced back. So some of these pouches are pieced on the back as well as on the front. And just briefly, I want to show you how that piecing is done when you're doing a pieced back like this one. Each of the designs comes with a placement guide. So this is the placement guide for the back of this black and white pouch. And you can see that it shows us the size of the fabrics we're going to need. Our instructions will also give us a measurement of the fabric, but if you want to use scrappy pieces, you can print this placement guide to get pieces that fit these scraps exactly. It also tells us the order. So this is piece number 1, this one's number 2, and this one's number 3. To do the piecing for the back, we start by hooping our fusion fleece as we did in our project, and we'll stitch our background placement stitch. In this case, the background placement stitch isn't the full hexagon, it's just the size of the center piece. Then we place our fabric 1 onto that placement guide and we fuse it in place, just like we did with our previous projects. When we stitch color change 2, that's going to be our tack down, you'll see that it's in the shape of fabric 1. So now you'll be able to trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance outside the placement line. And then you'll take your fabric 2 and align the edge of the fabric with the seam allowance we just trimmed. Then we'll stitch a tack down. We will flip and press, and then we stitch the next color change, which is a placement stitch for the 3rd piece of fabric. So this way we know which direction we're stitching and flipping. So now again we place fabric 3 right sides together, aligning the raw edge with the 1/4 inch seam we just trimmed. And then we stitch the tack down and flip and press. From this point forward, the rest of the project goes just like the one we did in class. We stitch a basting stitch, and then our quilting stitch, and then we trim this whole project back. Now, one of the things that's kind of fun about this particular set of designs is that the 3 rectangles and the 3 hexagons are the same size, so you can mix and match the fronts and backs if you want to. I know you're going to love making this hexagon zipper pouch, and you'll make tons of them. Thanks for coming to our stitch party today, and we hope you have lots of fun.